dive into underwater caves exploring dense and dangerous jungles as you accompany Lara on her most vigorous adventure yet. If 2013's Tomb Raider was the birth of an adventurer while Rise of the Tomb Raider was the rise of a survivor, Shadow of the Tomb Raider is the climax of it all as Lara completely encompasses the iconic Tomb Raider moniker. Having gone through the events of Tomb Raider and Rise of the Tomb Raider, the Lara Croft you play as now is one that's been warped and crafted by the events that have happened to her. She's much more stern and brutal, and though it can come in handy in tense situations, you see it become much more of an emotional and psychological issue for her. The beginning of the campaign quite literally starts as Lara foolishly ignites the Mayan apocalypse after some careless actions on her part. While she's still keen on stopping Trinity from taking over the world, her desires get the best of her and now leave innocent lives at stake. Shadow of the Tomb Raider has no trouble constantly reminding you that Lara's actions have consequences as she easily begins to border the line of being the enemy she's trying to stop. Its story is by far the darkest and most emotional one yet of the series. Lara isn't the only star of the adventure though, as the relationships with side characters get much more attention this time around. Lara's longtime friend Jonah returns as her trusty expedition partner who, along with some other new characters, get much more fleshed out. As compared to previous games in the series, they didn't feel like they were just along for the ride but were actually part of it. Ultimately, I found the story to complete the Tomb Raider trilogy arc on a well note, finally witnessing the full-blown Tomb Raider and the shadowy darkness that comes along with that. Shadow of the Tomb Raider takes a lot from Rise, branching out its exploration and heavily increasing the amount of puzzles. Taking place primarily in jungle environments, you'll see a lot of locations play a heavy role in just about every aspect of the game, from the story to the combat to the puzzles. Analyzing my playtime with the game, I can easily break down the gameplay into 3 categories consisting of exploration, puzzles, and combat. Each of them getting upgrades and feeling balanced, whereas in the last game I felt like the combat could at times overpower the puzzles and exploration. Starting off with exploration, Shadow of the Tomb Raider is the most open the series has felt so far. The new Paititi hub area is the largest one in the series and it'll play as the central hub for the challenges, side quests, and tombs. While yes, you can still continue a linear path by simply following the campaign objectives, I found Shadow of the Tomb Raider to be incredibly inviting to sway off the story's path. I often found myself following a campaign objective only to end up somewhere in a challenge tomb some minutes later. My curiosity would often get the best of me as I ended up going into an underwater cave going into the complete opposite direction of the campaign, telling me to climb up a mountain instead. It's because of this that I can't really tell you how long it'll take you just to complete the campaign, as I too frequently kept finding myself in challenge tombs solving puzzles and finding interesting new items for Lara. It's certainly as long if not longer than Rise of the Tomb Raider though. That's a good thing, as one of the gripes I had with Rise of the Tomb Raider were the challenge tombs being amazing, but just not enough of them. On the contrary, in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, I never thought that they were completely easy, and certainly never felt like there was a lack of them. They were always fun to stumble upon and use their environments while often focusing on certain elements like wind, fire, or water. There's plenty of new additions to your abilities and tools too that make exploring these tombs a lot of fun. Using the grappling hook, Lara can swing across wide open spaces, hang off tall cliffs, or wall run to faraway ledges. Every sort of action has more depth to it. You're not just leaping from edge to edge, there's so much more in between now. Along with the challenge tombs, side quests are spread out throughout the game, often leading to more background information on characters or in-game events that help give you a better understanding of some of the smaller story details. Moving on to combat, it oddly enough feels more brutal for the enemies this time around. So far, with every new entry of the Tomb Raider series, I felt like new and just hard to watch deaths were implemented for Lara, and it's the complete opposite now. Using the environment to her advantage, Lara will cover herself in mud and blend into the environment to better keep her stealth approach. It's actually something I personally really like because now you're able to move in and out of stealth approaches. If you get seen by an enemy, they'll start to follow you around, but you're still able to lose them if you hide well enough underwater or in a well-camouflaged bush. The rope arrows that play a big role in the puzzles and exploration are now a badass stealth kill option that lets you hang up enemies in trees. It's incredibly fun to execute and even more sick to watch. Speaking of weapons, they're all upgradable using items you find in your adventure. Stats like the damage amount, the fire rate, and the accuracy are all upgradable. Those upgrades along with the new skill tree help you truly encompass the title of Tomb Raider. The skill tree is fueled by XP points you earn while hunting and exploring. It's broken up into exploration, combat, and survival, as you start off with base level skills that branch off into more finite but helpful upgrades. It's an easy system to follow as you incrementally see each skill build off the previous one. Lastly, there's the puzzles that also see some upgrades. An interesting feature implemented with Shadow of the Tomb Raider is being able to tune the difficulty to your liking, not just the overall game but by section. So if you're a fan of puzzles but not so much the combat, you can crank up the difficulty of the puzzles but maybe lower the difficulty of the combat. The difference can be anything from more challenging AI to the game itself not giving you highlighted areas or voice hints on how to solve a puzzle. I thought it was a brilliant feature that lets gamers choose their own adventure in a sense and warp the game to their liking. The puzzles themselves feel more grand, featuring more finite details. I don't want to go into specifics just because I don't want to spoil anything, but the puzzles this time around felt like they offered much more critical thinking situations beyond that of finding a switch. You have to solve 2 to 3 other puzzles to even get to the switch to proceed onto the main puzzle. They certainly put my brain to the test, but were amusing challenges in the end that always left me with a sense of satisfaction when I was able to finally solve them. Across the board, Shadow of the Tomb Raider's gameplay feels like a nicely aged fine wine. It took about 5 years over 3 games to get there, but Shadow of the Tomb Raider nails the head on the hammer with its gameplay this time. The combat feels fleshed out, the puzzles are challenging, and the exploration lured me into its grasp. Shadow of the Tomb Raider is one beautiful looking game, though the jump from Rise to Shadow seems minor when you compare the visual upgrade from the original Tomb Raider to Rise. It's like comparing the visual upgrade from the Game Boy to the Game Boy Advance. You can see it, but it's not mind-breaking. With that said, already having a good looking game and just continuing that trend isn't necessarily a bad thing. The big improvement I saw was with the HDR support that really did look fantastic whenever flames or a sunset were on screen. The new color technology I think better sold the lush jungles and the variety of different tombs. Rays of light peeking through shafts and the ever so slight glow of a fire on Lara look absolutely amazing. There's also a great attention to detail with the environment as you see Lara closely react to objects around her like plant life and mud. Now, back from Rise of the Tomb Raider is the option to prioritize either high frame rate or higher resolution. Playing on the Xbox One X, you can either play at 1080p targeting 60 frames per second or native 4K at 30 frames per second. Personally, I prefer to play at 1080p 60 just for the action heavy scenes or the more cinematic cutscenes that could put a strain on the Xbox One X. Even with the world's most powerful console, I was able to get a few frame rate dips in the 60 frames per second mode when entering heavy populated areas with a lot of action. As for the 4K 30 mode, while the frame rate was much more stable, when it did dip in some of the more cinematic scenes, it was more noticeable being a dip from 30 to 20 than 60 to 50. Ultimately, that wasn't what would ruin the immersion for me. That instead would be the pretty frequent pop-in in the environment. Whether it was plant life, light, or just general objects, the pop-in could become distracting at times. NPC characters could also even look like clones of each other, either being the exact same model or almost having pretty much the same outfit. That's not to say that suddenly Shadow of the Tomb Raider is a bad looking game, but there are blemishes here. Shadow of the Tomb Raider dives into some of the darkest moments of the series, and it does it well with the accompanying soundtrack that transcends its moments of melancholy, despair, relief, and joy. When I was being cornered by a dangerous predator, the danger was only better sold by the dark, ominous music playing during the whole encounter. Jumping from one cliff to another and almost missing it, that gasp of relief was perfectly in sync with the orchestrated chime that would be in the game along with the trigger rumble on my controller. The performances by Camilla Luddington as Lara and Arl Balon as Jonah are stellar, capturing every bit of emotion that these two have to face on this climactic adventure. From the moments of dread to the scenes of excitement, nothing felt acted. Shadow of the Tomb Raider is an extraordinary completion of this 3-part story arc. I enjoyed sneaking up on enemies and taking them down in absurdly crazy ways. I welcomed the challenge that Tombs brought to me, and I let my curiosity go wild exploring the deep caves and dense jungles throughout South America. Its presentation gets a minor though nice upgrade that stumbles a bit in its execution, but manages to still wow me, being one of the best looking games of this generation. Of the 3 entries in the rebooted series, Shadow of the Tomb Raider is by far my favorite, improving on a lot of the lacking features of its predecessors. I give Shadow of the Tomb Raider a 9 out of 10. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to be notified whenever I make a new video. And if you want to watch my live streams or just talk gaming with me, then check out my Discord and Twitch in the description down below. Thank you all very much for watching, and happy gaming.